Marcus Williams adjusted his rearview mirror as he pulled into the parking lot of the small convenience store in Richmond, Virginia. The late evening sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the familiar weight of his concealed service weapon pressed against his side. After 15 years with the Central Intelligence Agency, Marcus had learned to notice everything: the way people moved, the cars that seemed to linger too long, the subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. Tonight felt different, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Maybe it was the stress of the operation he'd just completed, a 3-month undercover assignment that had taken him deep into a network of international arms dealers. Or perhaps it was the phone call from his daughter earlier that day, reminding him about her college graduation next week, a milestone he'd almost missed because of work, just like he'd missed so many others. Marcus stepped out of his black sedan, a vehicle that looked ordinary enough but contained sophisticated communication equipment hidden beneath its standard exterior. He was dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, trying to blend in with the suburban neighborhood where he'd stopped to grab a quick dinner before heading home to his empty apartment in Alexandria. The convenience store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he walked through the automatic doors. The teenage clerk behind the counter looked up from his phone, offering a brief nod before returning to his screen. Marcus moved through the narrow aisles, selecting a sandwich and a bottle of water, his trained eyes automatically cataloging the other customers. An elderly woman buying lottery tickets, a construction worker grabbing energy drinks, a young mother with 2 small children in tow. Everything seemed normal, routine even, but as Marcus approached the counter to pay, he noticed a police cruiser pulling into the parking lot, then another. Within moments, 3 patrol cars had positioned themselves around the store, their occupants remaining inside but clearly focused on the building. Marcus's pulse quickened slightly, though his expression remained calm. His CIA training had taught him to control his reactions, to think several steps ahead in any situation. He paid for his items with cash, exchanging pleasantries with the clerk about the weather while his mind raced through possibilities. Were they here for him? Had his cover been blown on the recent operation? Or was this simply coincidence, officers responding to some unrelated call? As he walked toward the exit, Marcus saw more patrol cars arriving. 6 vehicles now surrounded the store, and officers were beginning to emerge from their cars. Their body language was tense, purposeful. This wasn't a routine patrol or a simple response to a minor incident. This looked like a coordinated operation. Marcus paused just inside the store's entrance, pretending to check his phone while he assessed the situation. Through the glass doors, he could see officers positioning themselves strategically around the building. Some had their hands resting on their weapons, though none had drawn them yet. Their faces were serious, focused, and several were speaking into their radio microphones. The elderly woman with the lottery tickets shuffled past him toward the door, completely oblivious to the developing situation outside. Marcus gently touched her arm, causing her to look up at him with mild curiosity. "Ma'am, you might want to wait just a moment," he said quietly, his voice calm and reassuring. "It looks like there might be some police activity outside." She peered through the glass, her eyes widening as she noticed the patrol cars. "Oh my," she whispered. "What do you think is happening?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm not sure, but it's probably best to stay inside until we know more." The construction worker had noticed the commotion too, and was now standing near the window, trying to get a better view. The young mother had gathered her children closer, instinctively sensing that something was wrong, even if she couldn't see the full scope of what was happening outside. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced down at the screen, expecting perhaps an update from his CIA handler or a message from his daughter. Instead, he saw an unknown number with a simple message. "Stay calm. Help is coming." His blood ran cold. Someone knew he was here. Someone was watching this unfold. But who and how? Through the store's windows, Marcus could see one of the officers speaking into a cell phone rather than his radio. The officer was looking directly at the store, occasionally gesturing toward the building. Whatever was happening, it seemed to center on this location, possibly on him specifically. Marcus had been in dangerous situations before, more than he could count during his years with the agency. He'd been shot at in foreign countries, had his cover blown in hostile territory, and had faced down arms dealers and terrorists who wouldn't hesitate to kill him. But there was something uniquely unsettling about being potentially targeted by law enforcement in his own country, especially when he had no idea what he was supposed to have done wrong. The teenage clerk had noticed the police presence now too, and was nervously asking if everything was okay. Marcus reassured him with a calm smile. Though his mind was working furiously to understand the situation, he thought back through his recent activities, searching for anything that might have attracted police attention. The undercover operation had been classified, conducted under multiple layers of legal authority and oversight. His personal life was quiet, almost boringly so. He paid his taxes, followed traffic laws, and hadn't even had a parking ticket in years. As more officers continued to arrive, Marcus realized this wasn't going to resolve itself quickly or quietly. Whatever had triggered this response, it was serious enough to warrant significant resources. He counted at least 8 patrol cars now, with what looked like a detective's unmarked sedan pulling up as well. The detective, who emerged from the unmarked car, was a middle-aged, white man with graying hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement. He surveyed the scene, spoke briefly with several of the uniformed officers, and then pulled out what appeared to be a photograph, showing it to the officers around him. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as several of the officers looked from the photograph toward the store. They were looking for someone specific. They were looking for him. The question that burned in his mind was simple but terrifying. Why? What had he supposedly done that warranted this kind of response? And more importantly, how was he going to get out of this situation without it escalating into something much worse? Outside, the detective was now speaking into his radio, his expression serious and focused. Marcus knew that whatever was about to happen next would likely determine the course of the rest of his evening, and possibly much more than that. Marcus watched through the store window as the detective held up his hand, signaling the other officers to hold their positions. The man's methodical approach suggested he was experienced, someone who understood that rushing into situations could lead to dangerous escalations. But it also meant that whatever they thought Marcus had done, they were taking it seriously enough to treat him as a significant threat. The store had grown quiet except for the nervous whispers of the other customers who were beginning to realize they were trapped in the middle of whatever was unfolding outside. The teenage clerk kept glancing between Marcus and the windows, clearly trying to piece together whether the police presence had anything to do with the customers inside his store. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. Federal backup en route. Do not engage. Maintain position. The message confirmed his suspicions. Someone with knowledge of his CIA status was monitoring the situation, but it also raised new questions. If federal backup was coming, it meant someone in the government knew about this incident and was taking steps to intervene. The question was whether they would arrive in time and whether the local police would be willing to wait for them. Through the window, Marcus could see the detective approaching the store's entrance. His hand rested casually on his weapon, and his eyes scanned the interior of the store methodically. When his gaze fell on Marcus, it lingered for several seconds before the detective spoke into his radio again. Marcus made a decision. Rather than waiting for the situation to escalate further, he would take control of it. He walked slowly toward the store's customer service counter, where a public phone was mounted on the wall, an increasingly rare sight in the age of cell phones, but still present in some older establishments. "Excuse me," Marcus said to the clerk, his voice calm and steady. "I need to make a phone call. It's important." The teenager nodded nervously, clearly relieved that someone seemed to know what to do in this confusing situation. Marcus dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but had never hoped to use, the emergency contact line for CIA operatives who found themselves in compromised situations on domestic soil. The phone was answered on the first ring. "Duty officer." "This is Officer 7749, Marcus said, using his CIA identification code. "I'm currently surrounded by local law enforcement at a convenience store in Richmond, Virginia. I need immediate assistance and clarification of my status." There was a brief pause. "Stand by, 7749. Marcus could hear typing in the background, the rapid clicking of someone accessing classified databases and secure communication channels. Outside, the detective had reached the store's entrance and was now speaking with one of the uniformed officers, occasionally glancing through the glass at Marcus. 49. We show no current operations in your area that would involve local law enforcement, the duty officer said. Are you currently under arrest? Negative, but they appear to be preparing to make contact. I count at least 8 patrol units and 1 detective on scene. Understood. We're making immediate contact with Richmond PD to clarify the situation. Maintain your position and do not resist if they attempt to detain you. Federal intervention is authorized. Marcus hung up the phone just as the detective pushed through the store's entrance. The man was in his 50s with the kind of steady demeanor that came from years of dealing with dangerous and unpredictable situations. His badge identified him as Detective Ray Morrison, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd learned to read people quickly and accurately. Ladies and gentlemen, Detective Morrison announced to the store, I'm going to need everyone to remain calm and follow my instructions. We're investigating a serious incident, and I need to speak with each of you individually. The elderly woman with the lottery tickets looked frightened, clutching her purse closer to her chest. The construction worker crossed his arms, clearly annoyed at being caught up in whatever was happening. The young mother had moved her children behind her protectively, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay. Detective Morrison's eyes found Marcus and stayed there. Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside with me. Marcus nodded slowly. Of course, Detective. But first, I think there might be some confusion here that we can clear up quickly. We can discuss everything outside, Morrison replied, his tone professional but firm. Please keep your hands visible and move slowly. As Marcus walked toward the door, he could feel the tension radiating from the detective. This wasn't a casual investigation or a case of mistaken identity. Morrison was treating him as someone genuinely dangerous, someone who required extreme caution. Outside, the evening air was cooler, and Marcus could see more clearly the scale of the response. In addition to the patrol cars, he noticed what looked like a tactical unit setting up a perimeter further back. This wasn't just about questioning a suspect. This looked like preparation for a major arrest, possibly of someone they considered armed and dangerous. Put your hands on the hood of that patrol car, Morrison instructed, positioning himself where he could watch Marcus while maintaining a safe distance. Marcus complied, spreading his hands flat against the warm metal of the police cruiser. Detective Morrison, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding here. We'll get to that, Morrison replied. Right now, I need you to listen carefully. You're not under arrest at this moment, but you are being detained for questioning in connection with a federal investigation. You have the right to remain silent, and you have the right to an attorney. Federal investigation. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Whatever this was about, it wasn't a local crime or a case of mistaken identity. Someone at the federal level had flagged him for something serious enough to trigger a multi-agency response. What federal investigation? Marcus asked, though he kept his voice calm and non-confrontational. We'll discuss that once you've been properly searched and secured, Morrison replied. He signaled to 2 of the uniformed officers, who approached with handcuffs ready. Marcus felt the familiar weight of his concealed weapon against his side and knew that the situation was about to become much more complicated. In seconds, they would discover he was armed, and without proper explanation of his CIA status, that discovery could escalate everything to a life-threatening level. Detective, Marcus said carefully, before you proceed, you need to know that I'm a federal agent. I'm carrying a weapon under proper authority, and I believe this entire situation is based on incorrect information. Morrison paused, his hand hovering near his own weapon. What kind of federal agent? That's classified information that I can only discuss with someone who has appropriate clearance, Marcus replied. But I can provide you with a contact number that will verify my status within minutes. The detective studied Marcus's face, clearly trying to determine whether he was dealing with a legitimate federal agent or someone attempting to talk his way out of a serious situation. Around them, the other officers maintained their positions, ready to respond if things went sideways. Morrison's radio crackled to life. Detective Morrison, this is dispatch. We have a priority call from the FBI requesting that you hold your current position and wait for federal agents to arrive on scene. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. The CIA duty officer had worked quickly to establish contact with local law enforcement, but he also knew that the next few minutes would be critical in determining whether this situation would be resolved peacefully or whether it would spiral into something much more dangerous. How long until the federal agents arrive? Morrison asked into his radio. ETA 15 minutes, came the response. 15 minutes. Marcus realized that a lot could still go wrong in 15 minutes, especially if Detective Morrison decided that waiting wasn't in his best interests. The detective was clearly wrestling with the decision of whether to trust Marcus's claims or to proceed with what he'd originally planned to do. Detective Morrison stepped back slightly, his hand still resting on his weapon as he studied Marcus with renewed intensity. The radio call from the FBI had clearly changed the dynamic of the situation, but Marcus could see the detective was still weighing his options. Years of police work had probably taught Morrison to be skeptical of people claiming federal authority, especially in circumstances that seemed to contradict their claims. "You say you're a federal agent," Morrison said, his voice carefully neutral, "but we received a tip that identified you as someone involved in illegal arms trafficking. The person who called it in had detailed information about your vehicle, your location, and your activities over the past several weeks." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Arms trafficking. The irony was almost painful. He'd just spent 3 months infiltrating an actual arms trafficking network as part of his CIA assignment. Someone had taken his legitimate undercover work and twisted it into evidence of criminal activity. "But who and why?" "Detective, I can understand why that information would concern you," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "But I think someone has deliberately provided you with misleading information about my activities. The federal agents who are coming will be able to clarify everything." Morrison's radio crackled again. This time it was a different voice, more urgent. "All units be advised that we have additional intelligence suggesting the suspect may be expecting federal intervention. Recommend proceeding with the arrest immediately." Marcus's blood ran cold. Someone was actively working against him. Someone with enough access to police communications to monitor the situation and provide real-time updates designed to escalate the confrontation. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity or misinterpreted intelligence. This was deliberate sabotage. "Detective," Marcus said urgently, "whoever is providing you with that information is trying to manipulate this situation. Think about it. Why would someone involved in illegal arms trafficking be calmly standing here talking to you instead of trying to run? Why would the FBI be sending agents to intervene if I were actually a criminal?" Morrison's expression showed he was considering Marcus's words, but the additional radio traffic had clearly shaken his confidence. Around them, the other officers were becoming more agitated, sensing the tension between their detective and the uncertainty of the situation. "I need to search you now," Morrison said, making his decision. "Whatever your status turns out to be, I can't have someone potentially armed standing around while we wait for federal agents." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand your position, Detective. I am armed, and I have proper federal authorization to carry. My weapon is holstered on my right side. I'm going to need you to handle this very carefully, because if your other officers see you removing a weapon from me without proper context, this situation could escalate quickly." Morrison signaled to his officers to maintain their distance while he approached Marcus. "Keep your hands on the car and don't move," he instructed. As Morrison began his search, Marcus could see more vehicles arriving at the scene. But these weren't additional police cars. They were unmarked sedans with government plates, the kind of vehicles that federal agents preferred for their anonymity and reliability. "Detective," one of the uniformed officers called out, "we've got federal vehicles approaching from the north." Morrison had found Marcus's weapon and was carefully removing it from its holster. The detective's handling of the firearm was professional and respectful, suggesting he was beginning to believe that Marcus might indeed be legitimate law enforcement. "This is a nice piece," Morrison commented, examining the custom modifications that were standard for CIA operatives. "Not the kind of weapon you typically see on the street." "No, it's not," Marcus agreed. "Just like I'm not the kind of person you typically arrest for arms trafficking." 3 black sedans pulled into the parking lot, and Marcus felt a wave of relief as he recognized the lead vehicle. His CIA handler, Deputy Director Sarah Chen, emerged from the passenger seat of the first car, her expression grim but determined. Behind her, several other agents in dark suits spread out with the practiced efficiency of people who dealt with sensitive situations regularly. Chen approached Detective Morrison with her credentials already in hand. "Detective, I'm Deputy Director Chen with the Central Intelligence Agency. The man you have detained is one of our operatives, and I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding here." Morrison looked from Chen's credentials to Marcus and back again. Ma'am, we received specific intelligence about this individual's involvement in illegal arms trafficking. Are you saying that intelligence was incorrect? I'm saying it was deliberately fabricated, Chen replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to dealing with complex intelligence matters. Agent Williams has been working undercover for the past 3 months on an authorized operation targeting an international arms trafficking network. Someone has taken information about his legitimate activities and twisted it to make him appear criminal. As Chen spoke, Marcus could see Morrison's posture relaxing slightly. The detective was beginning to understand that he'd been manipulated, used as a tool in someone else's larger scheme. But who would do that? Morrison asked. And why? That's exactly what we need to find out, Chen replied. And we need to find out quickly, because whoever did this clearly has access to sensitive information about our operations and the ability to manipulate local law enforcement. One of Chen's agents approached and handed her a tablet computer. As she scrolled through the information on the screen, her expression grew increasingly concerned. Detective Morrison, she said, according to our preliminary investigation, the tip that led to this incident came through multiple channels. Your department received calls from what appeared to be concerned citizens. Federal agencies received anonymous reports, and someone even contacted local media outlets with accusations against Agent Williams. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Someone's trying to burn me, he said. Not just my cover, but my entire career and reputation. Chen nodded grimly. And they're doing it in a very sophisticated way. The information they provided was accurate enough to be believable, but misleading enough to cause exactly this kind of response. Morrison handed Marcus's weapon back to him, his earlier suspicion replaced by professional concern. Agent Williams, I apologize for the way this played out. We were acting on what appeared to be credible intelligence. You did your job, detective, Marcus replied, holstering his weapon. Someone wanted you to react exactly the way you did. The question is who and why. Chen's phone buzzed and she answered it immediately. Marcus watched her face as she listened to whoever was on the other end of the call. Her expression went from concern to alarm to something approaching panic. We need to move now, she said, ending the call. Agent Williams, someone just attempted to access your personnel file and operational records through multiple entry points. They're not just trying to expose you. They're trying to compromise everyone you've worked with and every operation you've been involved in. The scope of what was happening began to sink in for Marcus. This wasn't just an attempt to destroy his career or even to expose a single CIA operation. Someone was trying to unravel years of intelligence work, potentially compromising dozens of agents and operations around the world. Detective Morrison, Chen continued, we're going to need your full cooperation in investigating how this information was provided to your department. Someone with significant resources and intelligence capabilities is targeting our agent, and we need to understand their methods and motivations. Morrison nodded. Whatever you need. But I have to ask, is Agent Williams safe? Are my officers safe? If someone is willing to go to these lengths to target him, what else might they be planning? It was a good question, and one that Marcus had been wondering about himself. If someone was willing to orchestrate this kind of elaborate setup, they probably had backup plans in case it didn't work. And given the sophistication of their approach so far, those backup plans were likely to be even more dangerous than what had already happened. Chen was already coordinating with her team, issuing rapid instructions about securing Marcus's location, investigating the source of the false intelligence, and protecting other potentially compromised operations. But Marcus could see in her eyes the same concern that was growing in his own mind. They were dealing with an enemy who understood exactly how the intelligence community worked, and who had resources and capabilities that rivaled their own. Within minutes, the convenience store parking lot had transformed into an impromptu command center. Chen's team had set up secure communication equipment in one of the federal vehicles, while Detective Morrison worked with his officers to establish a protective perimeter. The other customers from the store had been questioned briefly and released, but Marcus remained at the center of a growing investigation that seemed to expand with each passing moment. Marcus stood near Chen's command vehicle, watching as analysts scrolled through data on multiple computer screens. The sophistication of the attack against him was becoming clearer with each piece of information they uncovered. Whoever was behind this had spent considerable time and resources studying his movements, his operations, and the procedures used by both the CIA and local law enforcement. Agent Williams, one of the analysts, called out, "We've traced the initial tip to your local police department. It came through a sophisticated voice modulation system that made it sound like multiple different callers. But the really interesting thing is the timing." Marcus approached the analyst's station. "What about the timing?" "The first call was made exactly 37 minutes after you completed your final report on the arms trafficking operation," the analyst explained. "Someone knew the moment your assignment was officially concluded and moved immediately to expose you." Chen joined them, her expression grim. "That suggests someone with access to our internal operational schedules. The list of people who would know that timing is very short." The implications were staggering. Marcus had always known that intelligence work carried risks, but those risks typically came from foreign adversaries or criminal organizations. The possibility that someone within the CIA itself might be targeting him opened up a far more dangerous and complex scenario. "There's more," the analyst continued. "We've identified at least 6 different government agencies that received anonymous tips about your supposed criminal activities over the past 48 hours. Someone wanted to make sure that no matter which agency responded first, you would be treated as a high-priority threat." Detective Morrison approached their group, having finished coordinating with his officers. "Agent Williams, I've been thinking about something. When we received the tip about you, the caller specifically mentioned that you might try to claim federal agent status to avoid arrest. They said you had false credentials and would attempt to contact accomplices posing as FBI or CIA personnel." Marcus felt another chill run down his spine. So they were planning for exactly what happened here. They knew I would identify myself as CIA, and they prepared the local police to disbelieve me. "It gets worse," Chen said, ending another phone call. "We just discovered that similar operations are being prepared against at least 3 other CIA operatives in different cities. This isn't just about you, Marcus. Someone is trying to systematically expose and neutralize multiple agents simultaneously." The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear, and it was far larger than anything Marcus had initially imagined. This wasn't personal vengeance or even a foreign intelligence operation. This looked like an attempt to cripple CIA operations on a massive scale. Deputy Director Chen, another analyst, called out urgently, "We're getting reports of suspicious activity around the homes and known locations of 7 more agents. It looks like this operation is happening nationwide." Chen immediately began issuing orders to CIA stations around the country, warning agents to take protective measures and avoid their usual locations. But Marcus could see the strain on her face as she realized the magnitude of what they were dealing with. "Who has this kind of capability?" Marcus asked. "Who can coordinate simultaneous operations against multiple CIA agents across the country?" "That's the question we need to answer," Chen replied. "But first we need to make sure you're safe. Whoever is behind this clearly has extensive resources and detailed knowledge of our operations. If their first attempt to neutralize you failed, they'll almost certainly try again." Detective Morrison had been listening to their conversation with growing concern. "Agent Williams, I think you should know that our department received a second call about an hour ago. The caller said you might try to escape with federal assistance, and they provided detailed descriptions of the vehicles and personnel who would be coming to help you." The words hit like a physical blow. Someone had been watching the entire rescue operation unfold, possibly from a nearby location. They knew Chen and her team were coming. They knew what vehicles they would use, and they had prepared the local police to treat the federal intervention as part of the criminal conspiracy. "They're still watching us," Marcus said, scanning the surrounding area. "Right now, as we speak, someone is monitoring this entire operation." Chen immediately activated her radio. "All units assume hostile surveillance of our current location. I want counter-surveillance teams deployed immediately, and I want this area swept for electronic monitoring devices." As her team began implementing security protocols, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Across the street, in the parking lot of a closed restaurant, a news van from a local television station was setting up equipment. The crew was positioning cameras with a clear view of the convenience store and the gathered law enforcement vehicles. "Chen," Marcus said, pointing toward the news crew, "how did local media find out about this so quickly?" Chen followed his gaze and immediately understood the implications. Someone called them too. They want this whole thing to be public, to be broadcast live. The media presence added another dangerous dimension to the situation. If the people behind this conspiracy wanted to destroy Marcus's career and credibility, having his arrest broadcast on local television would be the perfect way to do it. Even if he was eventually cleared of all charges, the public image of a CIA agent being arrested for arms trafficking would follow him for the rest of his career. "Detective Morrison," Chen said, "I need you to clear that news crew from the area immediately. This is now a federal security operation, and media presence poses a significant risk." Morrison nodded and dispatched several officers toward the television crew, but Marcus could see that the damage might already be done. The cameras had been rolling for several minutes, capturing footage of federal agents, police cars, and what looked like a major law enforcement operation. Marcus's phone buzzed with another text message. This time it wasn't from the mysterious number that had been sending updates earlier. This message was from his daughter. "Dad, are you okay? There's something on the news about police arresting a CIA agent and they're showing your car." The news was already spreading. Within minutes, footage of the incident would be online, shared across social media platforms and potentially picked up by national news outlets. Someone had orchestrated this entire scenario, not just to neutralize Marcus operationally, but to destroy him publicly as well. "Chen," Marcus said, showing her the text message, "they're not just trying to stop me from working. They're trying to destroy my entire life." Chen read the message and her expression hardened. "Then we need to find them before they can do any more damage. And we need to find them fast." One of Chen's analysts approached with a tablet showing a map of the local area. "Deputy Director, we've identified at least 3 locations with clear sight lines to our current position. If someone is conducting surveillance, they're most likely positioned at one of these points." Chen studied the map quickly. "Deploy teams to all 3 locations immediately. I want anyone found there detained for questioning." As her agents moved to investigate the potential surveillance sites, Marcus realized that the next few minutes would be crucial. If they could identify and capture whoever was watching them, they might be able to unravel the larger conspiracy. But if the Watchers escaped, Marcus and his fellow agents would remain targets of an enemy who seemed to understand their every move before they made it. The evening, that had started with a simple stop for dinner, had become a battle for Marcus's career, his reputation, and possibly his life. And somewhere in the darkness around them, the people responsible were still watching, still planning their next move. The CIA teams moved with practiced efficiency toward the 3 surveillance points Chen had identified. Marcus watched through binoculars as agents approached a water tower, an abandoned office building, and a parking garage that all offered clear views of the convenience store. The tension in the air was palpable, as everyone waited to see if they would finally get answers about who was behind the elaborate setup. Marcus's secure phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. Chen nodded, indicating he should answer while her technical team prepared to trace the call. "Hello, Agent Williams," came a calm, electronically disguised voice. "I imagine you're having quite an eventful evening?" Marcus felt his pulse quicken but kept his voice steady. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows you very well, Marcus. Someone who's been watching your career with great interest for quite some time. Tell me, how does it feel to be on the other side of an intelligence operation?" Chen was frantically signaling her technical team to extend the trace. Marcus needed to keep the caller talking as long as possible. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked. "What did I do to deserve this kind of targeting?" The caller laughed, a sound made eerie by the electronic distortion. "You really don't know, do you? You think this is random or personal revenge, but it's so much bigger than that, Marcus. You and your colleagues have been playing a game where you thought you knew all the rules. But you never realized there were other players on the board." Around Marcus, Chen's team was working frantically to trace the call and coordinate with the surveillance teams. Through his earpiece, he could hear updates from the agents approaching the potential observation points. "Team 1, water tower is clear, no signs of recent occupation. Team 2, office building appears abandoned, checking upper floors." "What game?" Marcus asked the caller, trying to keep the conversation going. "What are you talking about?" "The game where you pretend that intelligence agencies serve their country's interests," the voice replied. "Where you believe that the CIA, the FBI, the NSA are all working for the American people. But what happens when those agencies become compromised? What happens when the people at the top are serving different masters?" Chen was writing notes rapidly, trying to analyze everything the caller was saying. Marcus could see her mind working, connecting dots and considering possibilities that were clearly disturbing to her. "You're talking about corruption within the intelligence community," Marcus said. "I'm talking about something far worse than simple corruption." The caller replied, "I'm talking about systematic betrayal of everything you thought you were serving. But don't worry, Marcus. You'll understand soon enough. You and Deputy Director Chen both will." The mention of Chen by name sent a chill through everyone listening. Somehow, this person knew exactly who was present at the scene, possibly even what they were saying to each other. "Team 3, we found something at the parking garage," came the report through Marcus's earpiece. "Multiple electronic devices. Looks like sophisticated surveillance equipment. The site appears to have been recently abandoned." "How recently?" Chen asked into her radio. "Maybe 10 minutes. There's still warmth in the equipment, and we found fresh coffee." The caller seemed to know about the discovery at the same time Chen's team made it. "Your people are very efficient, Deputy Director Chen, but they're always going to be one step behind because you're still thinking like government agents. You're still following protocols and procedures that were designed by the very people who are working against you." Marcus realized that this conversation was being broadcast to others, that the caller wasn't working alone. "How many of you are there?" "Enough," came the reply. "And we're in places you would never suspect. Some of us have been in those places for years, waiting for the right moment to act." Chen grabbed Marcus's arm and pointed to her tablet screen. Her technical team had managed to trace the call to a general area, but what they'd found was disturbing. The signal was being routed through CIA communication networks, using legitimate agency infrastructure to hide the caller's location. "You're using our own systems against us," Marcus said. "Now you're beginning to understand. We're not foreign adversaries or terrorist organizations. We're people who used to believe in the same things you believe in, until we learned the truth about what those organizations really do." "Team 2 reporting," came another voice through the earpiece. "We found surveillance equipment in the office building, but it's been destroyed. Looks like thermite charges were used to eliminate evidence." The caller continued as if he could hear the reports. "You see, Marcus, every move you make is anticipated because we understand how you think. We used to be you. We used to follow the same training, the same procedures, the same naive belief that we were serving justice and protecting democracy." Chen was now coordinating with multiple teams, trying to track down not just the caller's location, but also to identify how many agency communication networks had been compromised. The scope of the infiltration was becoming clear, and it was far worse than anyone had imagined. "What do you want?" Marcus asked. "We want people to see the truth. We want the American people to understand what their intelligence agencies really do, who they really serve, and how they've been betrayed by the very people they trusted to protect them. And destroying individual agents accomplishes that how. You and the other agents we're exposing tonight are just the beginning, Marcus. Each of you represents operations that the public should know about, decisions that were made without oversight, actions that were taken in secret that affect millions of people. By exposing you, we're exposing the system." Marcus could hear the conviction in the distorted voice, the genuine belief that what they were doing was justified. These weren't random criminals or foreign agents. These were people who had worked within the intelligence community and had become convinced that it was fundamentally corrupt. "Team 4 reporting," came a new voice. "We've found the source of the television tip. Local news received an anonymous package containing detailed information about Agent Williams, including photos and documentation of his activities over the past 3 months." "What kind of documentation?" Chen asked. "Surveillance photos, copies of operational reports, even transcripts of supposedly classified conversations. Someone with high-level access has been collecting intelligence on our own agent for months." The implications were staggering. This wasn't a recent decision to target Marcus. Someone had been planning this operation for months, carefully documenting his activities and preparing to use them against him. But more concerning was the fact that classified operational reports and conversation transcripts had been included in the package. "You're beginning to see the scope of what you're dealing with," the caller said, confirming that he was indeed monitoring their communications in real time. "This isn't just about Agent Williams or even the few agents we're targeting tonight. This is about systemic compromise of your entire organization." Chen made a cutting motion across her throat, indicating that Marcus should end the call. But as Marcus started to speak, the caller cut him off. "Don't bother hanging up, Marcus. And don't bother trying to trace this call any further. By the time your people reach the source, we'll be long gone. But remember this conversation, because everything we've told you tonight is going to be proven true very soon." The line went dead, leaving Marcus and Chen staring at each other in the sudden silence. Around them, agents continued coordinating searches and investigations, but the caller's words hung in the air like a threat that couldn't be ignored. Chen's phone immediately rang with calls from CIA headquarters, FBI liaison offices, and other intelligence agencies. The operation against Marcus had been just the beginning of something much larger, and now they had to figure out how to respond to an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. 3 hours later, Marcus sat in a secure conference room at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The convenience store incident had become the starting point for what intelligence officials were now calling the largest security breach in modern CIA history. Around the table sat Deputy Director Chen, FBI counterintelligence specialists, NSA security analysts, and several other officials whose agencies had been similarly targeted. The full scope of the evening's events was only now becoming clear. While Marcus had been dealing with the Richmond Police Department, coordinated attacks had been launched against CIA operatives in Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Denver, and Seattle. In each case, the pattern was identical. Local law enforcement received detailed tips about supposed criminal activity. Media outlets were provided with documentation and photographs, and when federal agents arrived to intervene, the attackers had already moved to their next phase. "The good news," Chen said, reviewing the latest reports, "is that all of our targeted agents are safe. The bad news is that whoever orchestrated this has access to operational details that should have been available to only a handful of people at the highest levels of our organization." Marcus studied the photographs and documents that had been provided to news outlets about him and the other targeted agents. The level of detail was extraordinary. Surveillance photos taken over months, copies of classified reports, transcripts of secure communications, and even personal information about agents' families and private lives. "This isn't just a security breach," said FBI Special Agent Linda Rodriguez, who was leading the counterintelligence investigation. "This is systematic intelligence gathering by people who understand exactly how our agencies operate. These aren't outside attackers who got lucky. These are insiders who've been planning this for a very long time." Dr. Michael Chen, the NSA's head of internal security and no relation to Deputy Director Chen, had been analyzing the technical aspects of the attacks. "We've confirmed that agency communication networks in all 6 cities were compromised. The attackers had real-time access to our operational frequencies, secure phone lines, and even encrypted text messaging systems." Marcus felt a chill as he realized the implications. They were listening to everything we said tonight. Every decision we made, every plan we discussed, they knew about it immediately. "That's correct," Dr. Chen confirmed, "which means they also know about this meeting. Unless we've managed to completely isolate our communications in the past few hours." The room fell silent as everyone considered the possibility that their current conversation might also be monitored. Deputy Director Chen made a decision quickly. Everyone switched to manual note-taking. No electronic devices, no digital communication until we can guarantee the security of our systems. She turned to Dr. Chen. "How long will it take to completely audit and secure our networks?" "Weeks, possibly months," he replied grimly. "If these people have been inside our systems for as long as the evidence suggests, they could have planted backdoors and access points throughout our entire infrastructure." Agent Rodriguez had been studying the caller's words from Marcus's phone conversation. The person who called Agent Williams made several references to systemic corruption and betrayal within intelligence agencies. Combined with the sophisticated nature of these attacks, I think we're dealing with former intelligence personnel who've gone rogue. Former personnel with ongoing access to current systems, Deputy Director Chen added. Which means either they maintained unauthorized access after leaving service, or they're being supported by people who are still active within our organizations. Marcus had been thinking about the conversation with the mysterious caller, replaying the words and trying to understand the motivation behind the attacks. They mentioned that exposing us was just the beginning. They talked about wanting the American people to know the truth about what intelligence agencies really do. "Sounds like they're planning to go public with classified information," Rodriguez said. "The attacks on individual agents could be preparation for a much larger disclosure operation." Dr. Chen looked up from his notes. If that's their goal, tonight's operation was perfect preparation. They've demonstrated that they can penetrate our security, coordinate multi-city operations, manipulate local law enforcement, and control media coverage. That's exactly the kind of capability you'd need for a major intelligence disclosure. Deputy Director Chen stood and began pacing the room. We need to assume that everything we've discussed tonight may be compromised. We also need to assume that these attacks will continue and escalate. The question is how we respond without playing into their hands. Marcus realized that his personal situation had become secondary to the larger threat facing the entire intelligence community. What about the other agents who were targeted? Are they being brought in for debriefing? All 6 agents are being relocated to secure facilities, Chen replied. We're treating this as an active threat against personnel, and we're implementing full protective protocols. Agent Rodriguez received a text message and checked it carefully before speaking. We just got preliminary results from the investigation into the media packages. The documents provided to news outlets include operational details from at least 12 different classified programs spanning the past 5 years. Whoever compiled this information had access to files from multiple departments and security levels. The implications were staggering. A conspiracy involving people with access to years' worth of classified information from multiple agencies suggested either a massive network of corrupt officials or a few individuals with extraordinarily high security clearances. There's something else, Rodriguez continued. The technical analysis of the surveillance equipment found at the observation sites shows that it's government-issued gear. Not equipment that someone could buy commercially, but devices that are only available to authorized intelligence agencies. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to come together. So we're dealing with current or former intelligence officials who have maintained access to classified information, government surveillance equipment, and agency communication networks. How many people would have that kind of ongoing access? Dr. Chen had been making calculations on his notepad. Realistically, maybe 24 people across all agencies, but that assumes they're working independently. If they're being supported by others who are still active, the number could be much higher. Deputy Director Chen stopped pacing and turned to face the group. I'm going to make a recommendation that will be controversial, but I think it's necessary. We need to assume that our normal security protocols have been completely compromised. That means we can't trust our usual communication methods, our standard operating procedures, or even our personnel security systems. What are you suggesting? Rodriguez asked. I'm suggesting we go dark, Chen replied. For the next 48 hours, we operate as if we're in hostile territory. No digital communications, no electronic surveillance, no computer networks. We investigate this conspiracy using only the most basic, analog methods until we can guarantee the security of our systems. Marcus understood the necessity of the suggestion, but he also understood its implications. The CIA would essentially be blinding itself voluntarily, giving up its technological advantages in order to prevent further compromise. There's a risk to that approach, Dr. Chen pointed out. If we go completely analog, we'll miss any immediate threats or follow-up attacks these people might be planning. And there's a risk to not going analog, Deputy Director Chen replied. Every minute we continue operating through potentially compromised systems, we're giving them more information about our responses and capabilities. As the debate continued, Marcus received a handwritten note from an aide who had entered the room quietly. The note contained a single line that made his blood run cold. Your daughter called. She's received threatening messages about your work. The conspiracy had moved beyond targeting intelligence operatives professionally. Now they were threatening family members, escalating the situation to a level that made it personal for every agent involved. Marcus showed the note to Deputy Director Chen, who read it with growing alarm. The rules of the game had just changed again and not in their favor. Ladies and gentlemen, Chen announced to the room, we need to expand our protective protocols immediately. This is no longer just an attack on agency operations. They're targeting our families. The revelation shifted the entire dynamic of the investigation. Whatever these people were planning, they were willing to threaten innocent civilians to achieve their goals. That level of escalation suggested they were prepared to go much further than anyone had initially anticipated. Marcus realized that the phone call in the convenience store parking lot had been just the beginning. The real confrontation was still ahead, and the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined.